Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition and we turn now to poem 465, I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. Now, there are many that will argue that of the 1,775 poems in the Johnson edition, this one may be her most famous poem, maybe if not most famous, best known, right? As we get into this discussion, we'll ask, why is that the case? It is a strange first line, as Emily is gifted to have done so many times in her poetry. I heard a fly buzz when I died, is of course going to suggest that the speaker of the poem is dead. What sometimes we can reference as the Lazarus effect. For those of you that know anything about the biblical story of a man who dies named Lazarus, he is a pal of Jesus Christ's, and we're told in John 11 that the man was dead for 3 days before he comes back from the dead, which is of course a happy miracle for Lazarus. And yet, Emily will be one of the, I think, important questioners of that story to ask, where is the first-hand account of post-mortem for Lazarus? Surely somebody walked up to him and said, dude, you were dead for 3 days. Talk me through what that experience was like. Emily plays the game several times, however, in her poetry, where she imagines what it's like to be dead or to go through the process of dying. Now, when this poem was published, it was published in 1896 for the first time. It was actually titled Dying. And it is another death poem. You'll remember maybe that when we played around with poem 280. Do you guys remember this one? I felt a funeral in my brain and mourners to and fro kept treading and treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And when they all were seated, a service like a drum kept beating till I thought my mind was going numb. And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul with those same boots of lead again. Then space began to toll, as all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear, and I in silence, some strange race wrecked solitary here. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down and hit a world at every plunge, and finished knowing then, or when we did 449, I died for beauty and was scarce adjusted in the tomb when one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth, himself for one. We brethren are, he said. And so as kinsmen met at night, we talked between the rooms until the moss had reached our lips and covered up our names. Now, there's a very interesting line that comes down to us from Emily letter writing, where at the age of 21, she wrote to a pal of hers named Jane Humphrey the following. This will be 10 years before this poem gets written. Quote, the other day, I tried to think how I should look with my eyes shut and a little white gown on and a snowdrop on my breast, and I fancied I heard the neighbors stealing in so softly to look down on my face, so fast asleep, so still, imagining what it would be like for her to die. Just to remind, people don't die in hospitals at this point. The doctors come to the dying person, and then the friends will as well come to sit around in the mourning and the like. We'll see some of that here as well. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that as well you've worked through our preceding 464 poems. We just finished with 464, The Power to Be True to You. Now, one scholar has called this, quote, the drama of the deathbed scene. In some ways, we are pushed to what one scholar calls the extreme limits of what a dying person might perceive or see. Note at the end, there is no transcendent vision either about what it's like to go to heaven, which will be interesting for us. And, we've got to say it, the fly, which of course has always been a part of this poem, and I will say this poem is one of the famous poems of Room 303 for any number of reasons. This is how the poem reads. Let's enjoy it. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed. And then I could not see to see. Now, of course, right away, let's just point out the oddity of this poem. The speaker is dead, or soon to die, and says, the moment of my death was really weird. There were all these things that happened, but the last thing that happened was a fly bouncing against the window of my bedroom, trying to get out. The way that she will begin, however, is with her quiet voice. Notice, it's not like there's any shock in this poem at all. It's just a kind of reporting, if you will, right? Some have called this a proleptic poem, which means seeing into the future, seeing some future event. Emily imagining what it is that she will, experience when she dies. Notice all the senses first. So now we're annotating. Notice all the senses. First of all, she begins with what she hears in the poem. I heard a fly buzz when I died. By the way, buzz will take us back to 187. This idea of when I died, as we already pointed out in poem 280 and 449, will play a similar game. Right? Hear all the buzz sounds, what we call the hard sibilants of this poem as well. Notice the stillness of the room. Stillness. Notice all the doubles in this poem. Just start marking them as you go. 2 stillnesses, you'll notice it. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. Now, I will pay tribute again, as I've done so many times, to my Emily crew, who sits with me and helps me prepare for many of these lectures. And I assigned to a young lady, quite a gifted reader, to read this poem aloud for us. And she said, okay. Interestingly, her first time to read this poem, when she got to the word heaves, she actually read the word heaven. And if you'll look at the word, it makes some sense iconically that you would look at the word heaves and think of the word heaven. Because who has ever said the phrase heaves of storm? It is, again, one of those amazing creations of Emily that she plays around with a word like heaves, knowing your eye will look at the word and think of the word heaven, which would make sense given that it's a poem about dying. Yes? Okay. Notice we're told the eyes around. And, of course, now we're going to a different sense. Instead of hearing, now we're going to see, which is going to be significant because take a look at what the last 2 lines of the poem are about, and you're right, they are about sight. So in other words, Emily does this wicked weird thing where she's like, let me tell you what it was like when I died. And the first thing was, I was laying in my bed, and there were all these people around me watching me die, which, by the way, is exactly how people died back then. You didn't die in a hospital room hooked up to a bunch of cords and stuff. People were with you when you died, and you usually died in the same bed you were born in and the same bed you slept in all your life. That was the nature of it back then, okay? And so she says, eyes around, notice her dash, had wrung them dry. In other words, everyone's crying, everyone's sad, she's dying, right? And breaths were gathering firm, okay? By the way, notice all the rhymes here, right? So you've got rhyme to storm, you got room to storm, to firm, to room, right? These rhymes are slant rhymes. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset. In other words, everybody's getting ready, right? It does remind us of John Donne's valediction forbidding mourning, as virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say the breath goes now, and some say no. It is very similar. Emily, of course, would know that set of lines. The onset, notice capitalized. In other words, what's going to happen next? Well, think of it, guys. You're sitting there watching someone die. You don't know what's going to happen next. What, are you going to witness something? What? Dude, they're lying there, they're breathing, then they won't be breathing anymore. But she says, no, everyone was watching to see the onset. Onset, like before the storm. We've had these, guys, we've had these these wind bursts that come through in the summer. I mean, they're very strong, right? But often right before those bursts of wind, it gets dead still. And she says, that's what it was like as I was getting ready to die. It got so still in the room, like right before the storm. And then the onset of what? Read it. When the king be witnessed in the room. And again, we're back to the second repetition of the word room. The king, king, what king? In other words, is she a queen? We've heard her reference herself this way in other poems. Like, in other words, is she king? What king? So, I'm waiting. Everybody's sitting around. They're crying. They're waiting for the king to show up. I'm sorry, what king? Now again, because Emily didn't decide to just explain these poems to us, we don't know exactly. Some have argued that she's referencing the king of flies. Of course, Beelzebub, namely death, right? And Golding will play his game with his little ditty, Lord of Flies. We're familiar with that one. Some have argued she's making a biblical reference to King of Kings. Of course, in the biblical corpus from 1 Timothy 6:15, 16. And then the book that for her from the Bible was her favorite, Revelation 19:16, where the King of Kings is referenced. In other words, Christ, Jesus, is showing up. But notice, it's going to be witnessed in the room. But how is it going to be witnessed in the room? What, does she imagine that the people sitting there are going to see Christ's second coming at this death? It's quite fascinating, her language. Then she tells us what she did. So notice, we go from what she hears to what she sees to now what she did. I willed my keepsakes. That takes us back to Poem 263. Signed away what portion of me be assignable. And that's interesting. What can you actually give that will be kept? You're a dying person. Is she talking about physical artifacts? We have a tendency to think not here, unless she's referencing these poems, which of course she imagined no one would read after her death. This is my letter to the world that never wrote to me. Judge tenderly of me, she will say at the conclusion of that famous poem. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable, dash, and then it was, there interposed a fly. Notice, not an angel. Not an angel. Oh, I was getting ready to die and all of a sudden my guardian angel showed up. How sweet is that? No, not an angel. A fly. Which is, of course, can we say this out loud? The pest of all pests. Unless, of course, you guys like mosquitoes as ranking 1, right? Very few people I've ever met go, I just love flies. They're just amazing. Of course, what do flies feed on? Garbage, dead stuff, carrion, the like. They're interposed to fly. It's weird. It's like we're all looking for the king to show up. I'm getting ready to go bye-bye, giving away all my stuff. And then all of a sudden a fly shows up. Notice the verb, interposed. Got in the way. In the way of what? Well, on the window, in the way of the light that's on the other side of the window. And now we're playing with all kinds of Platonic referencing here, right? Where light is, of course, knowledge. And we come out of the darkness of the cave into the light of the sun. And we're blinded by the light and all of that in Plato's, vision. About the fly, then, she plays games with the language. With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz. Flies don't have any intentionality. They just fly around. Of course, as we've said often in Ring 303, we derive much of this idea from our study of Emily. The only difference between you and a fly is you know about fly swatters. Flies don't know about fly swatters. They wake up in the morning and they just do their happy fly thing until whack, they get jagged. But not you. From the moment you flushed your first dead goldfish, from the moment you buried your first pet, from the moment you, some of us tragically, stood next to a relative in a hole in the ground and had to say bye-bye, oh baby, you knew there's a fly swatter and it's coming. It's only a matter of time. You knew. Well, what does that do to somebody? With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then, notice all the and-thens here. Did you see it? And then, 3 of them. And then, the windows failed. What do you mean the windows failed? Oh, she means her eyes. In other words, as I was dying, the last thing I saw was a fly. And then, vision left me. I couldn't see. And the way she says it is, I could not see to see. Notice all the doubles. Buzz, stillness, room, see. Of course, our Platonic term for sight is perspicacity, insight, right? There's outside, I can see you guys sitting there, and there's insight. Well, I roll my eyes in the back of my head. No. Insight, wisdom, understanding. Of course, this begs all kinds of questions about what kind of understanding is happening at the end of this poem. Right? And notice, in the end, it's a fly. It isn't a butterfly. Think about that. It's not some happy symbol. It's a fly that she sees at the end. It almost seems as if, for her, truth is more important at the moment of death than some kind of illusion. What are we going to do with a poem like this at 2A? Well, I think her argument is the death moment can be serious, but it can also be ironic. I mean, I've had students that read this poem, they actually laugh out loud. It's kind of funny at the moment of so sacred, it's so solemn, it's so still. All of a sudden a fly shows up, going on with its little fly life. Bang, bang, bang against the windows. Some have seen that as symbolic of the soul trying to escape the body. What is it that Yeats says in Sailing to Byzantium? An aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon his stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress. Our soul is trying to escape this thing called our body. At 2B, the rhetoric here, all the doubles we pointed out, lots of hissing sounds we pointed out, stillness, of course, and so many other words repeated over again. I love the sound play that's so complex here. At 3A, well, we've mentioned a number of titles already. Think about Hamlet speaking in Act 4 to Claudius about the democratization of death. How a king can go a progress through the guts of a beggar. Right? That idea. We've had that study at learnstrong.net already. And then finally at 3B, to own a poem like this, how do you think about your own death moment? What will that be like, lying there? And what will you be waiting for to show up or to interpose? Thank you.